Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength.
Just because we're doing our lectures online doesn't mean that we need to then retreat and make life, all about being alone.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide.
I think there's not enough knowledge around the severity of the long-term impacts that a concussion can give you, and it's not really educated enough.
You should be having.
The minimum job search requirements is definitely problematic, and it is up to a computer to decide whether you receive your payments each month.
This is Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. We are officially back, and I hope that you missed us just as much as we missed you. I'm your host, Cass, and God, it feels so good to be behind the mic with all of you. We are back with a spanking new team. I know that you guys are going to love the new recruits. This week, however, we're going to do things a little differently in the studio. This episode focuses on the SA local music scene, and I cannot think of anyone better to come and represent that than Geordie Thunison and Madeline Cozzi. Both are in well-known bands in Adelaide and are going to give you the rundown on how to start up in the industry, what challenges they face, and how the industry has evolved. Hey guys, thanks for joining me tonight.
Hey, how you going?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Yeah, It's been a big day, but I'm happy to be on the radio.
This week is massive, so we're just going to jump in. I'm sitting down with Geordie and Madeline to discuss their time in the music sphere.
That's right. We are also talking with the Sound of Fresh, Mattia Maros, about her show on Fresh. And we also have Cass's favourite segment, Heaps Good News.
But before we get into any of that, we have Grace speaking with Melissa Tonkin, the owner and booking manager of the Gov.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
The Gov is obviously such an iconic music venue in Adelaide, and it's done so much for the local music scene. What has the Gov done to support the local artists?
For the last 30 years, we've been making local musicians feel welcome, providing a place for people to come and play, and at every standard of their musical development, from beginner right through to being a headline act on the main stage in the venue.
And what are some ways the venue nurtures local artists through that process?
We really try provide opportunities. So at a beginner level, someone would be quite welcome to come along and take part in a community music session. So perhaps join the ukulele or join the Cajun jam or an Irish jam, or, the Weekend Warriors would have musicians come and register and be made part of a band. We've also provided an open mic night where people can come along, move away from their couch in the lounge room and come and perform on the stage in front of an audience. So that's a great way someone at a real entry level could come along and perform in front of an audience or perform with other musicians. So often a development would be if someone performed well at an open mic night, they may contact us and say, look, we'd love to get a gig in the front bar, which are now called our Gibson stage. So they would then play a Sunday or Saturday night in the front bar. If that went really well, they might then say, look, I'd love to get a support spot in the venue, open up for a touring band. We would put their name forward. If that touring band liked what they heard, they might be invited to come along and open up in the venue on the main stage. And, the best outcome would be if that band then came back down the track and headlined a night themselves.
There's definitely so much that you can see that the Gov does for local talent. From your perspective, how do you think Adelaide's music scene has evolved recently, especially since coming out the other end of what COVID has been for us?
Yeah, I think the Adelaide music scene is really rich. And I think us being locked into South Australia during COVID really showcased what a wealth of talent we have here in South Australia. There are some world-class musicians in this town, and basically being locked into the state gave us the opportunity to re-engage with all the locals. We always have had a strong local following at the Gov, but the fact that no one could go and tour anywhere else meant that we reconnected with a lot of bands. We also had smaller audience capacities, which really gave opportunity for bands who may not normally play in a bigger room to come in and play and showcase the talent. And I think so many people in the audience were just blown away with how good so many musicians are. And, I really feel that the live music scene is flourishing. It's an exciting time. There's been quite a lot of funding during COVID to get musicians out playing and provide support and payment for that. So, yeah, we're in a pretty good place right now, I think.
I think I speak on behalf of a lot of people, but we definitely want to keep that up. Is there a way that the public can effectively support their favourite local artists and venues?
Yes, they can go out and buy tickets and go and see shows. And I think that is the best way to support musicians. Buy their merchandise and buy a ticket and go and see shows. And I think a lot of the population realised how poorly musicians and creatives were treated during COVID, with a lot of musicians not being able to access JobKeeper. And the support we saw during that period for people to go out and support musicians. They realised what they had to do was go out there and put their money down. We found tip jars were overflowing during that period, with all that money going straight to the musicians on top of their payment and their ticket sales. So I think getting out, supporting your local venue, going and seeing live music is the best thing the public can do.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Wow, thanks Grace and Melissa. Let's jump right back into the music. You're listening to Wavelength here on Fresh. Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. If you've just tuned in, we are focusing on the Adelaide music scene today, and I'm going to be speaking to Madeline Cozzi about her time in the music world.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thank you so much, Madeline, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Madeline, you're in 3 different bands as a drummer. Can you explain to our audience what the bands you're in and what it's like to be a part of so many?
So currently I'm playing in The Veins, Wingfield and Maisie, which are all very different bands. So it's actually quite fun to play in all of them because there's always something a bit different, and some of them I sing and some of them I don't, and that's like a little challenge on the side too. But yeah, it's really cool to be a part of different projects because you get to experience new things, you get to learn and collaborate with new people.
Recently you hosted the International Women's Cranker Wednesday, which highlighted amazing women artists. How was that experience, and have you felt any personal discrimination in the music scene?
So the International Women's Cranker Wednesday actually went way better than what I thought, and that made me really happy just because it's something that I put a lot of work into, and something that I'm really passionate about is obviously like women in the music scene, and you know, they haven't always had a voice and haven't always had the same opportunities to pursue and share their music. So celebrating that I think was super important, and it was an event where the proceeds went obviously to the artists and to women's safety services, and it was just great to have so many different female artists on board. So we had full band, a duo, a looping artist, like there was just a bunch of different bands and lots of people came. In terms of discrimination, I've not experienced a whole lot. If anything, there's been a couple instances of like stereotyping where it's like, oh, you're a girl, like make sure to hit hard on the drums, but you just like shut that stuff down instantly, you know.
Yeah.
And like once you get up there and you play, like your playing speaks for itself, you know, like yeah, I'm a girl, but I know how to hit a drum. And I think especially within our local scene, so many people are super aware, super supportive and super accommodating to each other, so it's not something that I've experienced a lot.
Bands mix between psychedelic rock, indie rock and rock punk, and you've been compared to The King, Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, Psychedelic Porn Crumpets and Blondie. How is it playing in bands that have such different sounds?
Yeah, again, it's just super fun. And with bands with different sounds, you also get to play with and alongside other bands that sort of suit that vibe as well. And so not only are you playing a bunch of different genres, you also get to experience and learn.
And what can we do as an audience member to support local artists better?
I think honestly the main thing is just going to gigs. You know, like you just want to support the artist by going to their gigs and experiencing their music and listening to their music, sharing their music, following them, like, you know, keeping up to date with the stuff that they're putting out. And I know for me especially, like, we work so hard and we put so much time and effort and passion into making our music and, you know, expressing our creativity, that all we want is to like put on a show and for people to come and receive and dance and watch it and reciprocate that feeling that we're putting into the music.
Now, I know you have a Western disco show coming up soon at Jive. Did you want to explain what that is and how do we get tickets?
So the Western disco is something that I'm super excited about right now. it's essentially just going to be a really fun time. And I'm playing with the band Maisie, and we've got Ebony, Emily, Sponge, and Velvet Trip from Byron Bay. And basically it's just going to be, a really groovy time, and we're just encouraging everybody to come to this gig and dress up in their own, take on Wild West meets 70s disco, come as like your disco cowboy, cowgirl, cowperson. Like, it's going to be a super inclusive and diverse gig, which is what we were talking about before, and that's something that we strive to do as artists, is creating a lineup that is quite diverse and inclusive, and just an environment where people can come and dance and feel comfortable and just enjoy the music that's around them. And you can get tickets on our Instagram page at NoMaisie, or on the Facebook event, which you just type up Moving On Velvet Trip Single Tour, and you'll see that pop up there as well.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
That was amazing. Thanks, Mads and Cass. Up next, I'm going under the hot seat to give you the ins and outs of the music world.
You have me, Madeline and Geordie, until 7 p.m. You're here with Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to Wavelength here on Fresh. Just before the break, you heard me, and now it's Geordie's turn with special guest Sasha. Take it away, Cass.
That's right. We have the Mum's Favourite crew in the studio today to discuss their band.
Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Hi. Thanks so much for coming in, guys.
Hey, thank you for having us. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Let's jump right in, shall we? You guys are both in Mum's Favourite, which is a 5-person group known in Adelaide for its indie and bluesy sound. Can you introduce the band to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's 5 of us. Me, Geordie, drummer, 2 guitarists and a bass player. And yes, our sound, it's, God, what is it like?
It's the worst question I hate answering. Everyone's like, oh, what kind of music do your band play? I'm like, rock, alt, blues, funk, fusion, prog. I don't know, here's my Spotify.
Just say that it's kind of like if Led Zeppelin and Jeff Buckley had like a musical baby.
I love that explanation.
Was Mum's Favourite.
Mum's Favourite started in 2017 and it continues to grow its audience in Adelaide and around the world. You've played sold-out shows as well as supported bands such as Skeggs, The Grogans and Teenage Dads. How was it starting in the Adelaide music scene?
It was really exciting because back when we started, there weren't as many bands as there are now, so there was like heaps of gigs, and we were just playing pretty much twice every weekend, and then that's how we got our name out there, just people seeing our name on posters every weekend, and it was just a really good way for us to practice our songs and practice our stagecraft. So yeah, it was really exciting but scary. And now we're opening for Wolf Mother in 2 weeks, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and better, and it's a lot of fun, and it hasn't lost the excitement behind it.
It's not a secret that COVID took a massive hit to live music, and although it's back, but there's still challenges. What has been your experience with audiences and venues post-COVID?
Well, post-COVID, it's been good not having the audience seated. When everyone had to sit down, that was such
terrible vibes, absolutely horrendous vibes. Playing school recitals.
Yeah, vibe.
But people paid to come and see you.
Vibe killer, absolutely. But now, post-COVID, everyone can get back in the marsh, and venues aren't having to cancel your show because of restrictions and stuff, which was all just lame. So I mean, necessary, but it sucked.
Yeah, it was not a lot of fun. It's so the best part of being a musician is having the crowd react to what you're playing. Seeing everyone jump around when we play certain songs. That's what I do it for.
Yeah, it's a transaction of energy when the crowd is seated, they're not even thinking about moving. It's you guys can still, tap your toes, bop your heads, but they forget about that, and so your energy that you're putting out to them is kind of just bouncing off of it and straight back onto you. And then things you can start speeding up and just rushing through a performance because no one's reacting to it, and you just want to get it over and done with. And I think that was something we struggled with.
Now, I think we all want to know, when are you guys playing next? How can we find you?
Well, we're playing next for, I think, is the Wolf Mother show.
Yeah, 7th of April at Oakbank.
Yeah, Oakbank, opening for Wolf Mother and the Super Jesus, and then later that night we're headlining Shit Fest, and that's, SCHIT Fest. But After that, we're going on a little mini tour, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be our first time playing interstate. It'll be the band's first ever road trip, stopping in Mount Gambier and Bendigo before we hit the big town of Melbourne. It should be good fun. Absolutely a big step out for the band. We've done the tour many times around Adelaide, but it'll be fun to pile into the cars and drive out to Melbourne and see what the scene's like out there.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, George and Sasha. Up next, we have Alex talking to Mattia for Wavelength Explains.
You're listening to Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
For Wavelength Explains this week, we're talking to Mattia, the sound of Fresh.
Wavelength Explains on Fresh 92.7.
This week on Wavelength, our focus has been the local SA music scene. Fresh is extremely passionate about community and supporting the local artists around us. One of the people who focus on this topic the most is Mattia, the sound and the voice of our station and the host of Fresh Off the Block. I've invited her here to speak with me and talk about her show and how it helps artists. Hey Mattia, thanks so much for joining me.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, would you like to start off by explaining Fresh Off the Block? What is it?
Yeah, for sure. So Fresh Off the Block is our local new music program. It allows local artists from all different genres to get their music played on the radio, which is, a huge thing for local artists.
And so how does it help support them? So obviously artists are starting out, they're in the early phases of their career. What does it do to take them to that next level?
So radio play on its own is one of the hardest things to get when you're an independent artist, and that's what, Fresh is all about, and specifically this show, because we are taking artists that are not specifically always EDM and giving them a chance to get radio play, which then leads to more listeners, it supports the community, there's so many things.
Amazing. Well, when is the show and what day?
It is every Wednesday from 8 till 9 p.m.
And does it have an Instagram?
It does. It is at Fresh Off the Block ADL.
Amazing. All right, thank you so much for joining me, Mattia, and make sure you listen to Fresh Off the Block.
Yes, it is.
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Alex. Up next, Ben takes us through all the good news that happened this week.
You're listening to Wavelength here on Fresh. Welcome back to Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Right now, Ben is going to take us through all the good news that happened this week.
I know there's gonna be heaps good news on Wavelength.
Wavelength is back for 2023, and this week has been jam-packed with good news stories, so strap yourselves in. With Formula 1 back in Adelaide over the weekend, visitors saw a range of historic racing vehicles and the showcase of electric vehicles powering the future. Adelaide was treated to a high-octane weekend with the Adelaide Motorsport Festival showing both new and old of motorsport in none other than Adelaide's Victoria Park. Following part of the F1 Adelaide Grand Prix track, there was a display of different vehicles every 10 to 15 minutes.
We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine.
Well, not quite, but Premier Peter Malinauskas has announced that Osborne Shipyard will triple in size after Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with US President Joe Biden and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in San Diego. As a result, South Australia will become home of 8 new AUKUS nuclear-powered submarines to be built within the next couple of decades. Whilst over the next 4 years, $2 billion will go towards the expansion of the submarine construction yard. 2023 Adelaide Fringe was the most successful to date, with the festival bringing more than 1,200 shows, 1,900 sold-out performances, and welcomed 6,000 artists. To top that off, the target of 1 million tickets was reached on the final night at 10:01 p.m, with the final tickets sold totalling 1,916,000. This is a huge feat for South Australia and makes the Adelaide Fringe the first festival nationally to ever sell 1 million tickets. Were you one of those ticket holders?
Sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having. Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
Thanks for that, Ben.
And that brings us to the end of the show tonight. Thank you so much for listening.
Make sure you're subscribed to the Wavelength podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can listen back to our old episodes right now, and tonight's episode will be up soon.
It feels so good to be back. Thank you both for joining me tonight. It's absolutely been a pleasure. Have you guys enjoyed yourself?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Being on
fun.
radio is fantastic.
I think think I'm just going to have you guys on every week.
Don't go anywhere. Up next, you've got Deep with Easy G. You're listening to Fresh.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.